Another aspect of our hybrid work strategies that we have to get right is our workspaces. Now it's time to hear from you again. Please answer the question, what should organisations invest in as they reimagine workplaces and spaces? While you're answering that, let me introduce Tony Massaro, one of our partners in PwC's real estate advisory practice, and Evodia Alataru, Principal and Design Strategy Leader at Hassel Studio. They're going to talk with Ben about the factors organisations should consider as they design their workspaces and property strategies for hybrid working.
Thanks for that, Michelle. And I really enjoyed the chat with Bryony and Nora, particularly hearing from yourselves that you thought performance management in a dispersed environment was one of the greatest considerations for them. But now, as we go on to workplaces and spaces, as Michelle said, we're joined by Tony and Evodia. And again, when I look at the results that are coming through, I can see that redesigning offices for collaboration and social interaction is one of the biggest or the biggest consideration around reimagining workplaces and spaces. So who better to talk to that than Evodia and Tony? Evodia, I'll start with you because off the back of that, you did some work at Hassel Studios and some research at the end of last year about where people were working pre-COVID, where they're working now, and where we can expect to see that go in the future based on their preferences. Can you tell us a bit about what you heard?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben. Yes, we did do some research ourselves. We did a survey of about 800 Australians and we went to people across the country deliberately because we wanted to get opinions from across Australia. And what we found was similar to the PwC research that a lot of people, in fact, the majority of people did say that they wanted to return to a hybrid sort of working whereby they could balance their time in the office and outside. What was interesting, though, in our study was that we found people in Melbourne who were still coming out of very severe lockdowns at the time, they were less inclined to want to go back to the office. So people were in the habit of working at home and therefore were much more attached to the idea of working at home longer term. So we think that the strength and the force of habit actually really played into those results.
And Evodia, were there any differences maybe between men and women that we can expect to play out?
Absolutely. This was the one piece that was really fascinating for us. We did ask people whether they wanted to return to the office full-time or permanently, and the majority of respondents who wanted to return full-time or permanently to the office were men. So we found that very interesting, and we wondered if there's something about the office that plays into the preferences of our male colleagues more so than our female colleagues. We found when we asked people about a hybrid or a more blended way of working, the majority of people that wanted that type of working in future were the women.
Yeah, that's a great point, Evodia, and I think particularly calling out the potential for unconscious bias to creep through in that as well. So we know that more people are working from home and that it's not going anywhere. Tony, I'm keen to hear from you. Does this just mean that organisations should reduce the amount of office space that they have?
Look, it's an interesting question, Ben. And I think that organizations should not immediately jump to reducing their space. There are some instances where it will make sense for an organization to reduce some space. However, some things will be different, I think, and we are already seeing they are a little bit different. And so I think it's important for organizations to look at their strategy first and say, well, how do we plan to work? And then how can we best use our space? For example, when people are coming into the office, you'll find that there's a much higher demand for meeting rooms. So, and as opposed to getting rid of some of the space, organizations may repurpose their space to allow for greater numbers of meeting rooms. Also, you might see some people will be pretty happy with it. Maybe they're spacing the desks out a little bit more from some of the very condensed workplaces that we had pre-COVID. And in addition, you touched on it before, but collaborative spaces, organizations might find that with their strategic agenda, they want more collaborative space. So I think, all organizations shouldn't immediately jump to the answer that, hey, we need to get rid of some space. It's a process by which they should think about it, think about what works, and then decide on what that course of action will be. For some organizations, it will be the right answer to get rid of some of the space. And I think one of the important things to remember for that is that if they plan to do that, that takes some time. There are more buildings right now and square meterage available for sublet than there has been for more than a decade. And so it is very much a buyer's market for that. So you wouldn't want to approach it just saying, hey, we're going to sublet this in the next month or two. It will take some time.
All right, Tony, well, between Jeremy Thorpe and yourself, you've both convinced me that the office isn't going anywhere. But I'm hearing from you both that its role is changing now in line with how workers intend to use it. Avodia, how does this then influence what the look and feel of the office needs to be?
Oh, it's a massive influence, Ben. And as Tony said earlier, we're starting really with exploring what is the role of the office. So what purpose does it play in the broader organisational context? How does it enable businesses? How does it enable the people and cultures to thrive? And how does it enable the type of work? So once those questions are explored and once we've got some answers on that, then we can start looking at what does it mean for the look and feel like. What do you want to express in the new workplace? What is the brand and what is the organisational purpose that you want to express? And what is it about the workplace that is offering something that other places don't offer? If workplace is now one of many places where people choose to work, then we've got to make sure that the workplace is really complementing and adding value for employees as well as for their organisations.
Well, Avodia, if I can just follow up on that one with you. Say in 3 years' time, what are a couple of things that we can expect to have changed when we're looking around our office?
Well, I think there's a number of things. So we've talked already about how the office might become a place that's much more about collaboration, connection and community. So therefore, the functionality and the space types that we'll see will be quite different. The role of the office is also going to be heightening the idea of organisational well-being and personal resilience and well-being. So there might also be a number of different types of environments that we find in the workplace that support well-being and resilience. And I think ultimately it is about expressing the uniqueness and the difference of each organisation, because it is that place that is the cultural heart and is the core of a business where people come together.
Thanks, Avodia. I'm expecting yoga studios in workplaces all around Australia after this. Before we finish up, I've got one more question that's on my mind. So, Tony, I'm going to throw over to you, because the thing I find interesting when it comes to real estate is that we often see organisations lock themselves into really long-term leases. What tips do you have about how organisations can embed flexibility into their real estate portfolio?
Good question, Ben. So flexibility is very important to understand, again, coming back to the strategy to meet the needs. Ways of locking flexibility in. Number one, I think, and what building a little bit on what Avodia said in the last question, something that is going to be different going forward for the workplace will be a lot more prop tech, right? There'll be a lot more technology in the office. Right now, as we speak, there's a conference going on that's called Smart and Healthy Buildings. Future Place puts this on. And it is examining, right, so the technology that will be used to make buildings more efficient, air quality monitoring, monitoring people going in. So this gets to that flexibility question of, who do people check in? What desks do they go to make it imminently flexible and usable? When you go on more on the lease side of the house, landlords are also, landlords particularly want to keep great tenants. So when there's flexibility, as an issue, landlords would probably say, yes, I want to keep these tenants. And so I would urge organizations to talk to their landlords about what will work for them. Typically in buildings, yes, the old school was long leases. You actually have some pressures coming on that right now, and long leases actually go to value, right? So for a landlord, I'd rather have you locked in for 10 years. But in fact, with some of the new accounting standards that are coming in with IFRS, where leases have to be looked at as a different lease, finance versus operational lease, you actually see pressure for shorter lease terms with more renewal periods there. So there's some of those things. And then you can also look at subletting on a basis that works for both you, the landlord, and subletting tenants as well.
Thanks very much, Tony. And Avodia, we'll be seeing you later on for the Q&A. Well, Michelle, that's the workplace of the future for you.